Hello, everybody, and greetings from New Orleans, Louisiana. Just got back from the DSA's annual meeting, and I wanted to give you guys a recap of what went on there. I think you guys are going to find it really fascinating. It was a really interesting and fascinating year. There's so much information to share that I don't think I'm doing it justice in just a few minutes here, but I'm going to cover at least some of the items that are most important to me. First of all, right before the meeting started, there was obviously the board of directors meeting where a lot of information is coming up. We're seeing companies really trying to change the way that they do business to adapt to a more customer-driven focus. I also, after that, hosted a roundtable of executives where we talked about the future of work, the implications of AI and automation on the workforce throughout the world, and how direct selling can really put itself into a position to absorb what is predicted to be these millions of people who will be ejected from the job market and will need a source of income. And what does direct selling need to look like in order for that to happen? That's an ongoing conversation. You can find a couple of videos on the YouTube channel about that. But most importantly, I think, was the new numbers that came out. While direct selling continues to grow around the world, I believe it was 1.9% growth, the U.S. actually saw its first small decline in a number of years. A lot of people are still, speculating on what that's all about. But the interesting thing about it was also the first year that I can remember where we actually started to segment the sales force and ask ourselves this question: of these 20.5 million people in the United States that are quote unquote involved in direct selling, how many of them are actually selling part-time, full-time, etc.? And the numbers came out really interesting. So of this group of people, it turns out that about 5.3 million of them, or to my math, about 26% of them are selling in some way, both part and full-time. And only 800,000 of those are actually full-time sellers. So an interesting idea here to look at is that what's left? Well, 15.2 million customers. So 74% of people involved in direct selling are there simply to buy products. Now, this is really, really interesting and important because as we're looking at this idea of the first kind of real kind of documented takeaway about customers that I've seen is that 74% of the people out there are there just to buy your stuff, but we don't see many forms of communication and channels of communication to directly interact with those people to keep them on board and giving them the value that they're expecting from your brand as a buyer. Many of these customers are still being treated as sellers, and I think that's a really, really big disadvantage for a lot of direct selling companies. Is these people constantly getting a message that is involving going to a training or recruiting somebody or selling people stuff when that's really not what they signed up to do. So really, really interesting thing to think about. And the next takeaway is that even in Q1, we're seeing numbers continue to go down. So some people are predicting that the industry is going to see another kind of flat year this year as we try to get ourselves together and figure out what are we doing in terms of this customer thing and how do we kind of adapt ourselves to into becoming a channel that allows for the way people want to buy stuff and the way people want to sell stuff today. Namely, the big kind of undercurrent of a lot of what's going on is this idea of going multi-channel. Just a few years ago, this idea of selling outside of a channel that was, if you were a direct selling company, selling outside of that channel was considered completely blasphemous, right? And some people still hold that belief. But more and more and more companies are kind of bursting that bubble and showing that they can have success in this realm. And we're also seeing companies from outside of direct selling looking into direct selling channels as additional ways to sell their goods and services into the market. There's so much going on out there that I think we really need to consider. And if you're still in that camp that's resisting this idea of multi-channel, I invite you to look at Coty or Revlon's acquisition of Unique, or to look at companies like Beauty Counter or Legal Shield or Longevity or ID Life. Even Cutco now seems to be getting ready to allow people to simply buy from their website if that's something that they want to do. And that's just a thing where we've got to recognize that, especially if you're a legacy direct selling company, your brand has spent, maybe decades getting out there into the world and people have heard of it, and maybe somebody wants to buy, but maybe they just don't want to go through a distributor, or maybe that process is too painstaking for them to actually convert into a sale. So maybe you could consider taking the money first and then connecting them to a distributor that can start a relationship with them and back them up. And so I think there's going to be a lot of experimenting and a lot of things going on, a lot more research. I've been talking to some of the DSEF fellows. As you guys may have known, the DSEF has really gotten a lot of focus under the chairmanship of Dave Wentz, and are really moving and charging towards their goals, and doing a great job of engaging educators and, through educators, students about direct selling, what it's all about, what we're really here to do, and the advantages of this type of a channel. At the same time, us being in this kind of state of flux where we know that direct selling isn't going anywhere. It's never going to go anywhere, but it does need to evolve into something that might challenge some of our core beliefs about what direct selling really is. And we challenge some of these ideas directly in the Future of Work roundtables that we do. So if you want to be in the next one, just hit me up, Michel at directtechlabs.com, and I will talk to you about what we do there. Or you can go to sourceds.com, sign up for those weekly emails, and you'll probably get some invites to events like that as well. But all in all, that's my sort of basic recap. There were many, many talks of various levels of quality and import, mostly higher quality talks. There was a really great chat from the IT team over at 31 about how they built out their systems and how they're running their IT strategy, which was really interesting. And just more and more interesting out-of-the-box thinking happening from companies in this space. And it's not just the startups anymore, guys. I really highly encourage you to take a look at what's going on out there and embrace the idea of experimenting. So in my future podcasts, we've got a bunch coming up with some more executives. We're going to talk more about these topics. We're going to get a little more deeply into it. We'll be hosting some dinners in some cities around the country in the U.S. To put some executives together and talk about this stuff. So if you want to be involved, reach out to me or join the sourceds.com email list. And thanks a lot for listening, and we'll be in touch with you guys next time. Cheers.